welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it very, very much. You know, we always like to spend a little time talking to those people that are on the ground, boots on the ground, taking care of their areas, and we welcome into the program Mike Kindler. Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Coach Mike, Fourchon Harbor Police Chief. It's one of those things that, you know, not a lot of people know exactly what you do. Tell us a little bit about your job and how that happens.
We're the Port Harbor Police, so basically we cover all the 10th Ward of Lafourche, from the La Rose, Intercoastal Bridge, all the way down to Port Fourchon by Grand Isle. But we cover mostly right in the port and at the airport that we have there in Galliano. We cover those two exclusively. And basically we're a service provider more than we are we do policing, but we do a lot of service protection. So we take care of our people who are the port workers, the people who make the port run, the people who keep the port of the 10th Ward thriving.
Yeah. Well, we've talked very often about the importance of the port, what it does, and the volume of what it does for industry, not only in our community and the state, but in the country. And so you guys oversee and keep everybody safe that's doing those things, right? Right.
Yeah. The port itself, we say, is 18% of the oil production for the country. We touch that. I know we touch 99% of the people in the oil field offshore. All of those companies that are offshore, they use our port. 99% of it uses our port for some means. So we have a lot of people from other countries, a lot of people from in the state, other states, a lot of workers, a lot of people that come through. So we have a hodgepodge of a lot of people that pass through our port on a daily basis.
Now, you know, we talked with Chet quite a bit about what happened, but tell us a little bit about your experience for Ida. Where were you? And what your thoughts were kind of after the storm.
So we remained in Galliano, actually, at our main office throughout the storm. We stayed there at the main office. We pulled everybody out of the port once we knew they were going to shut the gate down at the floodgate. Right. So we had everybody there. We were kind of trying to wait it out throughout the storm. And it's funny because, like, I was in Jefferson Parish during Katrina, and it's funny to talk back to the guys that I used to work with in Jefferson, and we talk about this storm, and what they saw is totally different than what we saw, where we were, you know, it sat over us for, it felt like 10 hours, and it just beat us, and it was a hard thing to go through. We lost our roof, and so the rain came in on us while we were there. We had to save all our computers and stuff like that. We took a lot of damage at the structure we were in, and it was a very interesting thing. And for me, it was worse than Katrina. I stood outside during Katrina at the EOC in Jefferson. I actually went outside in this one too for a very short period of time, then went right back in. It was pretty dangerous. Came right back inside, and it was something. It was it's hard to describe to somebody what it feels like to go through a hurricane if they've never been through one, to be inside and hear that wind howl and that sound. You don't know if a tornado's coming. You don't know what's going to hit you next. It was quite interesting. But, you know, we have 21 guys in our department, and the majority of them stayed. We had some that were off and left with their families because they were off, and they could leave for that week because we work. Our schedule's a week on, week off. So we had a lot of guys that were there for that week and stayed and jumped right back on the ground when it was over to start trying to get us back up and running.
Well, and that was kind of why I started the show with those guys who are boots on the ground, because you and your team really are the ones who are just making sure that everything is safe to go back to. And I know, again, we talked a little bit about that with Chet, but, you know, tell me about your experience when you went right back down to the port after leaving Galliano, which I'm sure was an interesting route as it was because of the damage that took place down in South Lafourche.
Yeah, just getting down there was something. Just getting to the port itself was its own trek. You know, you had a lot of debris in the roadway. You had a lot of down power lines, a lot of stuff across the streets, and you still had some mud areas and a lot of people's homes and roofing material. I think we plugged about 19 tires in the first 3 days on our cars because we had that many flats from driving over things that flattened our cars out. So we ended up with quite a trek to get down to the port. And then when we got to the port, it's funny because it wasn't as good as you want it to be, but it wasn't as bad as you kind of expected it to be. So we were happy that when we got there that it looked like it was rebuildable. It wasn't a flat wasteland. But at the same time, you know, could have been better. Would have been better if nothing would have happened. But we went down, and of course, trying to get the roads safe to get people back in to start moving and start doing our thing is priority one. That's what we start doing. And, you know, of course, it's manning the floodgate and making sure nobody's going towards Grand Isle, because you had a lot of people want to go to Grand Isle, stuff like that. And Grand Isle took quite a toll.
Huge hit, right?
So we were basically, for the first 3 or 4 days, just in kind of like in that recovery mode, making sure that only people that should be there were there. So a lot of our time was talking to people and getting people in to come in and start to do the rest of the recovery part of the operation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Y'all mostly do service, like you said,
Yeah.
but in this case, when we have these kinds of situations, it's a little more policing.
Right, and it's funny because like the port itself, the Harbor Police, we have a very complex department because we do a lot of service stuff, but we still have, having a lot of people come from other countries. We work with Border Patrol, we work with Customs, we work with Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office and State Police. We work with a lot of different agencies, and we have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of policing. We make a lot of good arrests, I should say. Not that the arrests are that rampant there, but we do protect our streets, and we do get some bad people off the road. But a lot of time, we get the satisfaction of doing nice things for people, not just the horrible things that you do when you're a policeman. It's not always going to somebody's house on a bad day, because nobody calls 911 to say, hey, I'm having a great day.
Right.
But we get the opportunity to go there and like make it better for people, and especially our tenants and the people that are down in the port.
And kind of making improvements with those things. Well, it certainly had to have been eye-opening. I know for anybody that tried to come down here, looking at the pictures didn't do it justice. No. And the 19 plugged tires says a great deal for your team just in 2 or 3 days, trying to just track down there. But we appreciate what y'all are doing, what you've done in the recovery process. As we get into this holiday season, we look back at the storm some. The Port Fourchon is up and running. Yeah,
amazingly, we were up and running in 9 days, which we were impressed on our own about, because we didn't, when it first happened, you weren't sure how long it was going to take, but then once the wheels started turning and the cogs started coming into place, we were able to kind of get it moving and going, and we were back up and running. Not at 100%. We are now.
About 80% at that time.
At that time. But we had it. Once we started getting power back, we started getting people in. We got the roads cleared. We got up and running and started at least producing again in about 9 days.
Wow. And now back at 100% is just remarkable. What a Christmas gift for our area, for the country. Just because it's so vital. The port is so vital to the oil and gas industry everywhere.
Right.
And you guys kind of help monitor that. The way to be able to keep everybody safe, y'all got a bit of a new program that you've started. Tell us a little bit about this Safe Ride Home for the holidays.
So recently we were contacted by Troop C, Captain Bajeron. He and Sheriff Weber from Lafourche Parish had a conversation, and in their conversation they were talking about some of the accidents we've been having. And if anybody's kept up with the news in the recent times, you've had a lot of fatalities, and most all of it has had alcohol-related issues. So especially with the 3 students that were from Nickel State, which kind of hit home, and those things happened. So we had a conference where we all met, all of the local leaders, and we started talking. And of course, there's things that can be done better on the engineering side. There's things that can be done better on the enforcement side. So we at the department were talking about what we can do to help. What can we do to make things safer for the people around us? And we were talking about the holidays coming up, and it's South Louisiana. I'm not going to kid anybody. People drink at parties, and then some people will make the mistake of getting in that car and turning that key. And we don't want that. And our goal is to keep the 10th Ward safe. That's our ultimate goal. So what we decided is we would start the Safe Ride Home program. And our goal was to have anybody who's going to be touching a 10th Ward street, whether they were coming to our streets for a party or leaving our area from a party, we didn't want anybody driving while under any influence of any kind, whether that be alcohol or otherwise. So what we decided to do was the Safe Ride Home program, where we would offer an opportunity for people to call our hotline, which is our main dispatch number. Okay. Tell us that they needed a ride, and no questions asked. We go pick them up and bring them where they needed to go within reason. I mean, I can't drive somebody back to Baton Rouge.
Not going back to California.
Right. It's going to be tough. But we can get people within a reasonable amount of space to make sure that they get home safely. Because look, having the opportunity in the past to make a death notification, it's never fun. And it's even worse during a holiday time. Nobody wants to spend every Christmas remembering the loss of a loved one. And you don't want to tell the person who is the intoxicated person's family that they were involved in an accident where people died, nor do you want to tell people who were hit by a drunk driver. So the goal is to make it so that everybody gets home safe and has a great Christmas, and next year they can celebrate Christmas without regret from the previous one. Okay, well, let's give that number out, just so for the people that are watching or thinking if they're going to be in the area, if they're going to be in that particular district and they want to be able to do that. Let's give that number out. It's 985-396-3911. That's
3911.
3911.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it's very indicative of, we don't want you to have to make a 911 call.
Right.
Dial the 3911 and keep everybody safe.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the experience that you've seen in the past with having to make some of those calls and some of those difficulties, and why it is that you and Troop C and Sheriff Weber and Bergeron came up with this idea.
Right. Well, it's you always look at somebody's life as precious, and it's so easy to forget about that when you're drunk. You forget about the things that when your brain is not working fully and you're just in that mode of, I'm drunk, I want to get home, I've done this 100 times, it's fine. You get in the car and you think, I'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like my son who's 19 years old, and he goes to, well, he's 20 now, I'm sorry. He's 20 years old, he goes to LSU. Okay. And he'll go someplace, I'll tell him, be careful, and he'll say, I'm not going to wreck. And my response to that is, and he's sober, my response to that is, nobody thinks they're going to wreck, but there's wrecks every day. Mm-hmm. So imagine when you add that alcohol to the mix, and now you're in a condition probably not the best to make good reactionary decisions, and then you go out and you start taking a 3,000-pound vehicle doing 60 miles an hour down the road, and you're delayed. Your reaction times are delayed. It doesn't take but a split second for somebody's life to end. And I don't know a policeman who's ever been happy about going to tell a family member, especially during a holiday time. I mean, how tragic is that at a holiday to go and tell somebody, I know it's Christmas time, but you have to celebrate it without Johnny or Susie because they were lost in a tragic accident that could have been avoided. So, I don't remember where we're talking about an exact question, but that's the kind of the thing. And every policeman, it's you feel for that family, even if you can't sympathize, you can definitely empathize, right? So when you empathize with them and you realize now how that whole thing has crushed their future Christmases. Right. I mean, imagine that for the rest of your life, every Christmas you're going to remember this was the day that you were notified. And we don't want that at all. Our goal is to prevent that from ever happening again. And if I could wave a magic wand to stop that from ever happening countrywide, worldwide, I would. But all I can do is control what I can control, and we're trying to control the 10th Ward. So we're trying to do our bit. Yeah,
and our families. And so it's one of those things that, I do the same thing with my son. Right. It's something we talk about all the time, about making sure that they're thinking about that. The other aspect of that is the driver themselves. Right. And somebody who can change their own life by making one really bad decision. Right. That can impact, their life for the rest of their life, maybe end up jailed for many, many years, or having to live with that guilt. So
right.
That's the other thing that really
and the funny thing is it could happen to anybody who just does a little light bit of drinking. It's not criminals, it's not stupid people, they're just doing something that they're not thinking all the way through, and they have that mentality of, this is not going to happen to me.
We're coming up on about 2 years now here with Corona, and a lot of people at home, a lot of people not being able to work for a lot of that. We talk about the importance of the port and what they do. And then we get into Ida and all of the damage and the difficulties with it. And now it comes to Christmas time, and I appreciate the fact that you and your team are willing to go the extra mile on top of all of those things to make sure everybody's Christmas is a good and safe one. And so I know, let's talk a little bit about what Christmas and maybe how it was a little different this year for you and your team.
Well, Christmas is a lot different. We actually remarked that this is probably the most un-Christmas feeling Christmas we've had in a long time. Particularly at my house, we don't have a Christmas tree up because we're still gutting everything. So, you lose a lot of those symbols that kind of make Christmas Christmas. But for us, it's been a lot of work, a lot of rebuilding, a lot of helping each other. It's been more of, we're still in like the post-hurricane state than we are in the Christmas state, so to speak.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, so we're still doing that. So for us, it's been a lot of work, and it's been a lot of, with this program, the guys who have been giving their time and foregoing their own drinking during their parties to make sure that they're ready if they're on call for this program, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and being able to be available and be on call, and it's really nice that you've gotten one call. And the good news is, it's interesting because we were talking off at the break. Somebody makes the call, and in the meantime, they end up getting a ride from somebody who's sober.
Right. Yeah.
So you're there to be available for them, but I think very often it gets people to thinking, what are my other options other than driving? Right. So I think the program itself, and again, we're talking about the Safe Ride Home program, Safe Ride Home for the Holidays program. Give that number out one more time, if you don't mind, Mike.
Sure, it's 985-396-3911.
3911, the 396-3911. Instead of calling 911 after you've made a bad decision, you can call that 396-3911 to make a good decision beforehand. And that way, you know, we've already had a difficult enough Christmas. We don't need the holidays, like you said, to be tainted with a bad decision and somebody really getting injured. But let's talk a little bit about the resilience of Lower Lafourche, the resilience of Port Fourchon, and what people are doing to help each other. It seems like instead of a focus on, you know, if ever we've not really focused on the materialism of Christmas, this is probably it.
Yeah. You know, going back to the segment, a few segments ago that we talked about, I was in Jefferson during Katrina.
Right.
You know, the biggest, I moved into Lafourche, I moved down to Bayou in 2019. And I can tell you from an outsider's aspect, moving into the Bayou, when I was in Katrina, when we rode around the New Orleans metro area, you have a lot of people who are hardworking, good people, but you had a lot of people who were outside saying, where's my help? Who's going to help me? Who's going to help me? The day after Ida, when we finally cleared the roads and I could drive around, it amazed me to see the elderly, to see people outside, nobody with their hand out, pulling stuff off of their neighbors' houses and doing things for each other and clearing their own roads. They didn't wait for the parish to come clear their own roads. Some people who had some small equipment cleared their own roads. I have never seen a more resilient group of people than I did down the bayou after Hurricane Ida. And that's speaking from my Katrina experience to this one. It amazed me. I mean, it was heartwarming to see. There was an elderly woman who was outside pulling branches out of her neighbor. It wasn't her house because we stopped and talked to her. Out of her neighbor's roof, the tree went into the roof, and she was outside on a ladder pulling out. And this woman had to be close to 80, 85 years old, and she was on a ladder out there working so hard. And I mean, that you realize how resilient people are when you see people get out there and do that kind of stuff.
You know, it's kind of interesting. You and I have a very similar situation at our home, and that, you know, my Christmas tree is this big this year. And my wife loves big Christmas trees. I mean, we've got 3 or 4 of them typically. But she had to have a tree. And so it was interesting as we look about this different Christmas, but at the same time, despite the fact we're still in a camper and work being done outside the house, or in the house while we're outside of it, I can appreciate some of these people whose homes had a tree go right through it.
Right.
Whose home got completely destroyed.
Right. When we had a couple officers.
That.
We had a couple officers who lost almost everything.
Wow.
And those guys have done working with their insurance, working with everything, with everybody who's helped them. We've had outside help where people have helped. We've helped each other, those kind of things. So it's definitely a different Christmas because I have a sergeant who works for me who lost 90% of his house. He had one room that he could stay in while he was rebuilding. And during that time, two of his children had children. He became a grandpa on the same day for 2 people. And he's done a remarkable job of keeping his spirits up and also being a leader for the other guys in our department. Because here's a guy who's lost everything and has every reason to be down on his luck. And he's not. And he's out there doing the best he can for those around him, and he's working his butt off.
Well, and that's, again, you know, and that's why I bring up the resiliency of the people that work for you, the resiliency of the people in the area. But how exciting this program is, because it's about continuing to help people. We're thinking about the people who are in your area. And can you describe what area? We've got about a little less than a minute left. What area that is for people?
We're covering the 10th Ward, everything from the Intercoastal Canal and the Rose south. To Grand Isle. Let me say one thing real quick. Some people are concerned about getting in a police car and driving home. I understand that concern. Some people have that fear. But I want people to understand that we have no ulterior motive. This is to get them home safely, and that's all it is. We're not looking for criminal activity. We're looking to get people home.
Bottom line is, if you're ever going to have a ride in a police car, this is the time to do it.
Absolutely.
When you're invited by the police to say, let's get you home safely. Absolutely. Mike, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate all the information. Thanks for the hard work.
All right, thank you for sharing our message.
Absolutely. All right, that's the Safe Ride Home for the Holidays program. We've given that number out several times, and we appreciate Mike coming on. Again, Mike Kindler, Port Fourchon Harbor Police Chief, and all the good work that they're doing, and good luck to your sergeant who's lost everything. We'll keep him in our prayers. All right, guys, that'll do it for this edition of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more local programming when we continue.